She was betrayed on what was meant to be the happiest day of her life. Yet fate had a twist waiting, one no one could have foreseen. Let's step into the story. Emma Carter had always pictured her wedding day as the most magical moment of her journey. A day when every dream she had ever carried in her heart would finally take shape. But fate had other plans, cruel ones that would push her spirit to its limits. The chapel looked like paradise itself, white roses blooming everywhere, chandeliers sparkling, and guests dressed in their finest, all waiting for the bride who was about to walk toward forever. Emma stood just behind the doors, wrapped in a gown of lace that shimmered in the light, her father's arm steady at her side. Her heart pounded with nervous joy as she whispered to herself that Daniel loved her, that nothing could ever shatter what they had. But deep inside, a quiet unease tugged at her, a warning she chose to silence. The music swelled, the doors opened, and Emma began her walk down the aisle, smiling brightly, her eyes locked on Daniel, the man who had once vowed to give her forever. Yet instead of pure happiness, she caught a flicker of hesitation in his gaze, a shadow that made her chest tighten. The priest's words filled the room. Vows were spoken, and then it was Daniel's turn. Silence cut through the air like a blade. Then, with trembling voice and downcast eyes, he turned away. Not with love, but with betrayal. He confessed he could not marry Emma because his heart already belonged to someone else, a woman boldly seated in the very front row. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Emma's mother broke into tears, her father's jaw hardened in fury, and Emma herself stood frozen, her world collapsing, her long-cherished dream crumbling into dust. Her eyes burned with tears, her chest ached with humiliation, and all she wanted was to run, to vanish from the hundreds of stares witnessing her downfall. Just as her knees threatened to give way, just as all hope splintered into pieces, the sound of boots echoed against the marble floor. From among the polished guests stepped a rugged cowboy, his piercing blue eyes sharp, his sun-worn skin roughened by life, his quiet strength commanding every glance. He walked forward with calm certainty, his hat tipped low, his presence filling the room with unspoken power. When he reached the altar, he looked at Emma, not with pity, but with respect, with recognition, as if he had always known her pain. Then, before the stunned crowd, he extended his hand. His voice was steady, gentle, yet firm as steel. You don't deserve tears on a day meant for joy. If he cannot keep his vow, then let me. The entire chapel held its breath. In the ashes of betrayal, fate had revealed a moment no one could have imagined. Emma, trembling and broken, yet searching for something solid to hold on to, met the cowboy's eyes. And in them, she found safety, honesty, and the faint spark of hope. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Whispers roared through the crowd like a storm, but in that instant, Emma realized her story was not over. It was only just beginning. And for everyone watching, it was clear. The cowboy had rewritten her tragedy into the start of something unforgettable. The hall remained stunned as Emma's trembling fingers rested in his rough, steady palm. Whispers and gasps echoed like thunder through the chapel. Yet within that fragile moment she felt strength flow from him. A promise deeper than anything Daniel had ever offered. While her former fiancé stormed out with the woman he had chosen, leaving only humiliation and broken trust behind, Emma stood tall beside the stranger who refused to let her fall. His name, she would soon learn, was Luke Harrison, a rancher from the edges of town. Few in the city knew him, but those who did spoke of his grit, loyalty, and the kind of resilience only forged through hardship. His hands bore the calluses of endless labor, his eyes the weight of stories marked by both pain and endurance. As Luke steadied her, he leaned close and whispered, "Walk with me, not for them, but for yourself." Those words lit a spark in her heart. Together, they walked out of the chapel, the crowd parting in stunned silence, some whispering scandal, others marveling at fate's bold hand. But Emma no longer cared. For the first time that day, she felt free. Outside, sunlight poured over them like gold. Emma drew in a deep breath, her tears drying in the warmth of the stranger's presence. Days passed, and while the town buzzed with gossip about the runaway groom and the mysterious cowboy, Emma withdrew to the quiet of her family's farm. Ashamed, wounded, yet unable to forget the man who had stood with her when everyone else had watched her break. One afternoon, Luke appeared at her gate, his horse tied nearby. He didn't bring flowers or hollow words, only a basket of simple supplies, and more importantly, a silence that soothed rather than hurt. Slowly, a friendship blossomed, not built on promises but on actions. Luke repaired broken fences, tended to her father's horses, and listened without judgment whenever Emma needed to pour her heart out. She learned, in time, that he too had once been abandoned, left behind by a fiancé who couldn't bear the hardships of ranch life. In Luke's story, Emma saw not only the echo of her own heartbreak, but also the courage to move forward. Days slipped into weeks, and with every sunrise and every shared laugh beneath the vast Texas sky, their connection grew stronger. Emma began to understand that real love wasn't about dazzling gestures or glittering promises. It was about standing by each other when life turned cold. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the horizon glow in fiery oranges and soft purples, Luke turned to her and said, "You deserved more than a broken promise, Emma. You deserve a love that fights for you every single day." In his eyes, she didn't just see words, she saw a lifetime of truth. Her heart, once shattered, began to heal in the warmth of his gaze. And even though fear whispered it was too soon, too fragile, she knew fate had placed her on this path. Months later, when whispers of scandal had faded and Emma had rebuilt herself stronger than before, Luke took her hand beneath the very chapel roof where her trust had once been betrayed. This time, there were no lies, no doubts, no shadows in the groom's eyes, only the steady flame of a cowboy who had stood by her through her darkest nights. As she said, "I do," Emma's voice no longer trembled with fear, it rang with certainty. The crowd, who had once witnessed her heartbreak, now bore witness to her triumph. Her story had not ended in betrayal but in redemption, proving that sometimes the love we dream of is not the one we plan for, but the one fate delivers when we least expect it. And as Emma and Luke walked down the aisle together, hands intertwined and spirits unbroken, the message was clear. True love never abandons. It endures, it lifts, and it begins right where despair thought it had finished. Life after the wedding was nothing like the dream Emma once imagined when she thought she'd marry Daniel. And yet, it was everything she had secretly wished for when she finally said, "I do" to Luke Harrison. Their modest ranch house on the town's edge was far from the polished city life she had known. But the quiet mornings, golden sunsets, and the steady rhythm of ranch life gave her a peace she had never felt before. She learned to ride beside Luke, mend fences, feed horses, and gaze at the stars from the porch while cicadas hummed in the dark. Luke wasn't a man of many words, but his actions spoke louder. Every day, he showed her that love wasn't made of silken promises, but of standing shoulder to shoulder when life's storms came. Yet joy is never free from trials. As weeks turned into months, shadows from Emma's past crept back. Daniel, the man who had humiliated her on her wedding day, returned to town, no longer with the woman he had chosen. Whispers spread quickly. Their love had burned out, leaving Daniel bitter and full of regret. One evening, as Emma and Luke shopped at the small town market, Daniel appeared. His eyes restless, his voice heavy with apology, he begged Emma to forgive him. He claimed he had made a mistake, that he wanted her back, that she belonged to the life only he could provide. The townsfolk who gathered stood in tense silence, as if that day of betrayal had replayed before their eyes. Emma's heart pounded, memories of shattered vows rushing back. But when she looked at Luke beside her, steady, unshaken, she knew she was no longer the woman who once clung to Daniel's promises. With calm resolve she told him, "You chose your path, Daniel, and I chose mine. I'll never regret the hand I held when mine was about to fall." Her words silenced the crowd. Daniel's face twisted with anger. He muttered threats, vowing she'd regret turning him away, before storming into the night. Though shaken, Emma leaned into Luke, who quietly said, "The past can knock at our door, but it can't break us unless we let it in." His words became her anchor. But the days that followed brought unease, for Daniel was not a man who accepted defeat. Strange things began to happen. Fences mysteriously cut, horses turned loose at night, supplies stolen. Luke suspected Daniel, though they lacked proof. Emma's worry grew, but Luke reassured her, "We'll face this together." And together they did. Each trial became a reason for their bond to deepen, for Emma to rise stronger, not just as Luke's wife, but as a woman who had uncovered her own strength. One night, Beneath the endless Texas sky, Luke held her hand and said, "Life will never stop testing us. But as long as you're by my side, there's nothing I can't endure." At that moment, Emma realized her journey had come full circle. From a woman broken on her wedding day to one rebuilt by love and courage. And though Daniel's shadow still lingered, she knew her story with Luke had only just begun. The night was calm, the Texas sky glittered with stars, but unease pressed on Emma's chest. Weeks had passed since Daniel's bitter return. Though he had disappeared into silence, she could still feel his shadow haunting their happiness. Luke had doubled his watch over the ranch, his rifle always within reach, his eyes scanning the land like a man who knew danger could come at any moment. Emma admired his strength, but even more, she cherished how he never let fear poison their home. "No matter what comes," he told her one evening on the porch, "you and I are stronger together." But fate was about to test those words. Late one night, the dogs erupted in frantic barking, followed by the thunder of hooves pounding the earth. Luke seized his lantern, jaw set tight as Emma's pulse thundered in her chest. Together they rushed outside, only to find the barn engulfed in flames. Daniel had made his move, his vengeance turning their toil into fire and ash. Inside, the horses screamed in panic, trapped within the inferno. Without a second thought, Luke charged into the smoke, his figure swallowed by the blaze. Emma's cry split the night, fear cutting deep, but she refused to stand idle. Snatching up buckets, she battled beside him, her hair singed, her dress scorched, her throat burning from smoke. Side by side, they freed the terrified animals and fought the fire back. When the last embers dimmed, the barn stood blackened but not lost. Luke stumbled out at last, covered in soot but unbroken, his arm firmly wrapped around Emma. Daniel had vanished into the night, a coward slipping into the shadows. Yet the ruin he left behind was plain to see. At dawn, neighbors gathered, drawn by the smoke, and whispers spread quickly. Daniel had crossed a line too far. The sheriff swore he would hunt him down. Though Luke knew men like Daniel never yielded easily. For days, the ranch bore the scars of fire, but Luke and Emma carried themselves with quiet strength. They had stood and fought as one. Then came the night Daniel returned, desperate, furious, catching Emma alone while Luke worked the fields. His eyes burned with obsession, his voice dripping venom. "You were meant to be mine, Emma," he hissed, grasping for her arm. But Emma, no longer the broken bride he once shamed, stood unshaken. Her voice rang firm as she pulled away. "I was never yours, Daniel. The moment you chose betrayal, you lost me." Luke appeared then, his presence a barrier of iron between Daniel and Emma. Tension erupted, words colliding like thunder, until Daniel's rage drove him to draw a pistol. Neighbors, drawn by the shouting, gasped at the sight. In that breathless instant, Emma's hand found Luke's, and with steady courage she whispered, "We face this together." Luke stepped forward, his tone calm yet commanding. "Put it down, Daniel. This isn't love, it's poison." For a flicker of a moment, Daniel's trembling revealed the weakness beneath his fury, but pride chained him still. Before the standoff could turn to tragedy, the sheriff and his men rushed in, seizing him as his furious cries faded into the night. The nightmare had ended. Silence fell, and Emma turned to Luke, tears streaming not from fear, but from relief and gratitude overflowing. The town hailed their bravery. Their tale, the betrayed bride and the steadfast cowboy, was etched into local legend. That evening beneath the stars, Emma rested against Luke's shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You gave me a life I never thought I deserved." Luke pressed a kiss to her forehead, answering softly, "And I'll keep giving it to you every single day." The fire of betrayal that had once threatened to destroy her had instead forged a bond stronger than she had ever imagined. Emma's journey had come full circle, not as a tale of sorrow, but as proof that love is not spoken. It is lived through courage, through loyalty, through standing together when the world tries to tear you apart. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel.